Hello, this is the E3 Justice League podcast. I'm with my guest, Ms. Ringland Vassal.
Hi, I'm Elvin. Here again.
I'm Tamisha Maloku, and these are our listeners.
My name is Xavier Blake. I'm also one of the listeners.
My name is Daniel Gonzalez. I'm also one of the listeners.
My name is Jonathan Cepeda. I'm also one of the listeners.
And I'm Marcia Ringland Vassal. So excited to be a guest here on the show.
So my first question is, what is something that would surprise the average voter about the State House?
I think what would surprise the average voter at the State House once they get there is how beautiful that building is.
Oh.
It is so beautiful. It's so majestic. And you're like, wow, I didn't know this was like this. So I think that would be something that would surprise most voters who have never been in the State House. That's how beautiful it is.
Yeah, also I'm seeing them by the street, crossing by the street.
Mhm.
Oh my god, yeah. It's beautiful.
Really?
I like it.
Yes.
I really like it. Like
Yeah.
the architecture, it's so impressive.
It is.
My god.
It is. It is
Yeah.
really. And you guys, with your teachers, you guys, they do daily tours there as well. So they'll take you from the basement to the third floor. It's just beautiful. There are two sides. There's the House of Representatives side that I was in, and then there's the Senate side, and then their offices, because that's also the workplace of so many people. So it's just a beautiful place, and I think it would be nice if you guys actually, because you're doing so much around this, get a chance to go visit. I think so.
Yeah.
Me? Yeah, I remember in middle school when me and actually Xavier and Daniel, we went to the State House. It was very beautiful, especially the inside, like the chamber where that's where they cast the laws and everything. So it was very nice, very colorful. So yeah, I thought it was very beautiful.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree with that.
It was nice. It was nice. Yeah, the House of Representatives. That was where I spent 6 years.
Yeah.
And it's 75 members that are in the House of Representatives. The Senate, on the other side, there are 38 members. So combined, the General Assembly is made up of 113 regular people, right? That people voted to go there and to represent them.
Yeah.
I did wanted to ask a question. So, as a woman of power, right? So before you got your chance to get in the State House and everything, you was an activist before that, right?
So, no, I was not an activist before that. I was busy doing my teaching job, raising my children, and just doing what regular people do. I was never an activist, but I've always thought about justice, and I've always thought about what can I do since I was really, really young to improve not just my life, but the lives of others. But the State House, I sometimes call it the State House gig. The State House thing was literally like a young student got shot and killed. He wasn't a student at the time, he was 21 years old. He got shot and killed, and one of my sons, I have three, and one of them came home and he says, "Mommy, they shot Kip." And Kip was a student at Mount Pleasant High School, and I had seen him play basketball because my son played on the basketball team, and Kip was just amazing. He could shoot. The ball was in his hand. You know he's going to score. And I traveled with the team a lot at the time, and when I heard that he got shot and killed, I'm like, I'm running for office. I'm running because I think we could pass some good common sense safety laws, and that's how I got in.
What were your expectations when you were elected versus what was the reality of your political experience in the legislature?
So when I went there, I mentioned to you that I wanted, my purpose for going there was to pass good common sense gun safety laws because I didn't think that kid needed to have died. And I think gun violence is totally preventable. Also, I started thinking about many students that I've had who were shot and killed. They were in my classroom, they were asking me for Jolly Ranchers, and they were my students. I remember losing the first boy, Tyson, and I still remember losing the last boy that I've lost, Eric, and there were some in between. And so my reason for going there was to fight and to ensure that we prevent gun violence in the state of Rhode Island. And so my expectation was, wow, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna do this and it's gonna be so fast. And what I realized that to get laws passed that made sense to you, right? And to your neighbors, didn't make sense to everyone. And you're like, wow, I thought this was like so easy, but it's not easy. It's actually really hard to get a good piece of legislation passed.
Why do you think it was like so difficult for everybody to be on like the same page?
So it's difficult for everyone to be on the same page because everyone has values,
Yeah.
right? And they're guided by those values.
Yeah.
Also, the people that elected you want you to do certain things, right? And so the folks, the other 75 people that was in my chamber, may not want the same things. For example, in 2016, when I went to the General Assembly, you were not hearing so many conversations being talked about gun violence, especially in Rhode Island, because people didn't want to upset the National Rifle Association. So they were very afraid, in my mind, and they didn't want to upset anybody. I didn't care. I didn't care because I had students that I taught who were no longer here. And I thought that was what a travesty that my 15-year-old and my 16-year-old and my 14-year-old, they were dying. And so, but I just didn't want to think about just the fact that I want to pass good common sense gun safety laws. But I also wanted to know what were the root causes. What happened? Why were young people dying? And so I started having conversations about the root causes of young people dying. Yeah. And I found that some of the root causes were, one, families were working really, really hard, sometimes 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and they weren't always home to take care of their children, right? Not because they didn't want to, but because they had to choose between work, right, and keeping the roof over their heads. Yeah. I also found that there was institutional racism that was connected to gun violence. And every time I say that, someone is like, how can that be, right? And it can be because when we think of the urban core areas of Central Falls, Woonsocket, Newport, parts of West Warwick, Providence, Pawtucket, most of the people who live in these areas are Black and brown, right? And so when we think about racism, we also must think about the kinds of investments that are placed in our schools, in our communities, and the devaluing of people with Black and brown skin. Because if you don't think people with Black, and if lawmakers don't believe that Black and brown skinned people and poor white people and indigenous people are valued, then they would not invest robustly in their communities. And so one of my big fight in ending gun violence was the passing a $15 living wage, right? Because we talk about the intersectionality of gun violence. We call it the social determinants of health and of well-being, and it's all connected. And so it's important to have these conversations. And I am very proud of the work that I did in the assembly. for 6 years, and then I didn't want to be there anymore because it was exhausting, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm out of here.
I wanted to ask, it was
Yeah.
exhausting mentally, like, or like both, physically and mentally, like,
So it was exhausting both mentally and physically because a lot of time people, in order to create changes, sometimes you have to make yourself vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to stand alone sometimes. So when you're voting on bills, when you guys go to the assembly, we should go for a mock session so you can actually see how this thing operates.
Yeah.
And the bill comes up, and the speaker is the person in charge, and then there's a vote with all. There's a platform, a screen like this with all the names, 75 names. And I remember one evening they were voting on, say, taking away money from public schools to place into charter schools, right?
Yeah.
And when I looked on the board, I was the only red vote. So it takes courage, and it takes wanting to make yourself vulnerable, where even if you're the only one, you will stand with your constituents, your neighbors, and you will stand on your own values of treating people with respect and dignity and love and care. So it was physically exhausting because I felt like I was kicking against the brick every time. It was emotionally exhausting because when I went to the General Assembly, there was not a lot of black or brown people. I was the first Jamaican to be elected to the Assembly. I was the first black woman from the English-speaking Caribbean. And so a lot of people wasn't used to hearing my voice.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of things that were never done there before. Like I stood, like this month, if I was on the House floor, every single day I would stand up and read a poem. People don't read poems in the Assembly.
Yeah.
So I was a little different, but I was so glad and so honored that my neighbors chose me, not just once, but twice. But 3 times actually, because the term is 2 years, and I was there for 6 years, and we got a lot of good things done. But it was exhausting, and then I just like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to lead
Yeah.
from the outside, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Daniel, Jonathan, y'all got anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I have a question. Is
Yeah.
there like a law that you have passed that you seen like a huge difference after that law was made?
So one of the laws, when I went to the assembly and started thinking about passing a $15 living wage, right? Because when I went, it was like $9.50, and the person in charge, who was known as the speaker, he actually thought I was crazy, and I remember saying to him, Massachusetts have about $9.50 or whatever they had, but they had more than. And I remember saying, we don't always have to follow. We can actually lead in Rhode Island, right? And so we got that law passed, not just by myself, but organizing, right? And talking to people in my community and across. I'm on social media, and I do crazy things on social media. I read poems on social media. I dance on social media, because I want people to join me. And I wanted to know not just my name, but my motivations, where I came from, and what really ignites my passion. And so we got that bill passed, and now by next year we'll have $15 an hour, which, by the way, is not a livable wage. Next year we should be, really and truly, we should be about $25 an hour. So it's not enough, but it's better than,
what it used to.
And then another bill that I was so proud of, that I sponsored, I spoke on the last show, was about creating trauma-informed schools, right? And I fought that for literally 6 years, and we got it done last year, or maybe, I think it was last year. So that was one bill. We're still fighting for the bill to make universal lunch and breakfast free, right? So no child that goes to school should ever be ashamed to go to the cafeteria because their family owe lunch debt. Because I believe and most people that I talk to believe with me that food is a basic human right, and everyone should have access to food. And so, one of the reasons why we have a food pantry at Visa Street is because of my work. It's a full pantry where kids can access food, and we wanted to have it here, and that will come in due time, I'm sure. But I just wrote a grant a couple of weeks ago for $650,000 to make sure that we have an emergency food pantry in every public school in the urban core, and I think it's going to happen. So you guys can cross your fingers with me.
Yeah, let's all do it.
Oh yeah.
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 Another great something that I did also was to make sure that we have these emergency closets here, where kids in this school can access feminine products, can access deodorant, socks, and all that stuff. And so this work is not done by one person, right? It's done by people who believe. But I want to kind of end by saying all of you around this table can make changes in your community. And your community right now is your school, right? And where you live,
Yeah.
right? And you can inspire people. When I ran for office, people didn't know, because it was usually in the General Assembly, men, white men, and wealthy white men, and mostly lawyers who were in the General Assembly. When I ran among few of the black, brown women and poor white women who dared to run, right? We changed the landscape. When I won my election in 2016 by only 17 votes, it made international news. It wasn't just Rhode Island, it made literally international news. And we have done stuff that people thought was really impossible, but we have changed the way we think about the poor, right? Because we're having conversations. We have changed the way we think. I mean, you guys are working on this bill right now to for the 4 mental health days.
Yeah.
That was like so foreign that kids can actually conceive these ideas and they can come to fruition. So I am so glad that I was there. I am so glad that I was able to represent, because this was my district, right? Because I live like right up the street. And so in this area, I was representing like so many kids from this school. I was their state rep until like January, right? So I was representing 15,000 people. And my siblings would laugh and they were like, how come people call all the reps like rep? And most people say Marcia. And I always joke and I'm like, they say Oprah, they say Beyonce. Like some people just have one name, you know? Like, because they're so cool, they don't need 2 names. So I really liked it.
Should mental health be part of the students' rights?
I think that universal health care should be a part of every person's right. I think it's a human rights issue, so everyone should have access, including children. I also think mental health screenings should begin, say, in pre-K, so that if there anything that we need to identify or anything that we need to help kids dealing with their emotions or just talking about their feelings, I think, and actually there's a screening. There are some pediatricians right now that are actually doing mental health screenings. I also think there's another screen, and I'll bring it in and show it to you guys, for the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's all in numbers and to kind of gauge like where you are. So I really think that should be on the Bill of Rights right, through the United Nations. But, you know, my worldview is these are things that everybody needs,
Yeah, I totally agree
you
with you
know?
because our mental health it's basically really important because our mental
Yeah.
health can affect our physical health.
Absolutely.
So it's really important that the schools
Yeah.
and basically everyone
Yeah.
or parents too
Yeah.
understand the importance of our mental health because
agree.
there are children that talk with their parents and say oh I
Yeah.
feel stressed with school and then they
Yeah.
say how you can feel stressed, you're a child.
Right.
That doesn't go.
I agree.
So I am basically like how because they're humans too, they can feel stressed by school or something that they
Absolutely.
can do.
And so, what if I was a 15-year-old, right? And my parents were like really conservative, right? In their thoughts and in their views and the time period that they lived. And I didn't want to upset my parents. I would find little things in pamphlets, maybe in English and Spanish about mental health. I'd kind of leave it around the house. You know, not give it to them because they're like, why are you giving me that? Right? I'd probably just leave it, you know, because it's a different world and parents are just catching up, right? And the conversation about mental health is kind of been like taboo, right? Like people don't want to talk about these things for a long time because if you talk about it, then you must be like, right? Must be crazy. So I think the more that you young people are having these conversations with your friends in your school, the more we normalize it and the more people can get help. The more it, you know, there's this lingo, it says, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to have a bad day because that makes us human. That makes us, and it's okay also to ask for help. It doesn't make you less. It doesn't make you wimpy. It doesn't make you, and it just makes you a real person, you know, and just loving yourself and taking care of yourself and telling yourself, and I've got to do this, by the way. I've got to look in the mirror and say, Mara, you're good. Because I am worthy of my own love. I am worthy of my own admiration. I am worthy of my own affirmation. You're beautiful. You're strong. Things are rough, right? Oh my God, sometimes it feels like there are more ups than downs or downs are up. But I am going to be okay. And I have people that loves me. And I have people that can support me. And asking for help does not mean I am weak. It actually means that I am really strong. Because only strong people can say, you know what, I really, really need some help. And you know, but we've got to start having more of these conversations around the table, in your classroom, and in spaces that people are not going to judge you, right? And how do you, I know that someone's not going to judge me. Mr. Dion is not going to judge me because I'm going to build a relationship with him and I might tell him just a little thing and I'll see how he reacts, right? Because you know the people that's in your classroom. We all know each other. I know I can talk to Mr. Healy, right? After a while, you know the people that you can talk to and understanding that we're in this together, right? And I always say, you know, there's a saying that say rise and fall, we'll rise and fall or whatever. I actually say we'll rise and rise because there's no fall in here once we have the support.
I feel like in general, kids don't feel the need to speak up because at school, if you do speak up about your mental health, they might look at you like not necessarily as like you're suicidal or like you got problems or you're trying to hurt yourself. They'll just probably call you to the nurse's office and just send you home. And when you go home, they're going to tell your parents and going to be like, well, Xavier said yada yada this to the nurse, and it just come off as a bad friend. So I just feel like you should be able to talk about it, like as a whole.
I agree. And I think that's changing, right? And so my recommendation as well, sometimes adults don't always want to listen to all that you have to say. One of the tools that I've used since I was 14 is a tool of writing. So I'll write my thoughts down, right? If I feel some kind of way about Mr. Dion or any other adult or anyone, I will write out my thoughts to the person. I like to use, we should have more conversations about using iMessages. I would like to share with you how I feel. I want to just share with you that I'm really stressed out. I would like to get some help. And I would have rather staying at school rather than going home. Because the minute you started using the you said this, you said, that becomes really confrontational. You, right? Because the minute you start saying you're like pointing that finger. But I am in charge of my emotions. And like I said, talking about how we feel emotionally, you know, it's kind of like now people are talking about it more since George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a good thing, but people were hurting a long time ago before that. You know, but you guys can change this thing. You can turn the ship around. You can start talking in safe spaces, and you know the teachers that you can trust. You know the people that you can talk to. You know, because every teacher is different. Every person is different. Find at least one person in this building that you can trust and talk to them. Talk to them. And like I always say, teachers were mandatory reporters. So if you tell me that you are going to commit suicide, I will tell you that I have to report it. I'll have to tell the principal. But I've also I've done that before. And guess what? Because that student told me, we were able to get the help and the support that he or she needs, right? So it's not a bad thing. But like I say, trust is everything. Find one person. If you do not have one person in this building that you can trust, as of right now, start thinking about who you can trust so you can talk to. Does that make sense?
This concludes the E-Cube Justice League podcast. I want to thank you, Ms. Ranglin Vassal, my listeners, Xavier Blake, Daniel Gonzalez, and Jonathan. And
well, you remember, stay tuned and
be positive.
And stay in school.